All right, welcome back to the DSR channel. The Forge of the Artificer is finally out. They released it just slightly early, and here we go. I'm going to dive into the base class. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and do like an initial review and analysis on these, and then I'm going to and go through all the content in multiple videos, not all at once here, and then I'll go back and like start ranking things. Okay, but there's a lot to cover first. I want to get through the initial review and analysis first. So here we go, base class, and you can see up here I've got on the left side, this is the old Artificer from Tasha's Cauldron of Everything was the last time this was printed. And then we have on the right, the new Artificer from the Forge of the Artificer, the Eberron book. And then I've also got in this tab over here, the last UA we saw on the Artificer, which came out in February. So I will refer to that as needed as well. So let's get into it. There we go. First up, core features, which is in a bit of different order here. And largely, this is unchanged. The biggest change here is the lack of the note about the proficiency with firearms, which is a bummer because firearms became martial weapons, and artificers do not have proficiency with martial weapons, which means artificers are no longer proficient with firearms. So I don't know if that's an oversight. Seems off. It was a cool thing to do, so I wish they would have left that in, or maybe they can errata that real fast. Everything else is more or less the same. Yep, everything else is the same. However, the multi-class, there it is, the multi-class thing changed here, which is when you multi-class into Artificer, if it wasn't your starting class, you gain proficiency in one skill of your choice from the Artificer skill list. So now you gain a proficiency when you multi-class into it, like the Bard, Ranger, and Rogue. I'll give you one. So that's awesome. You also, okay, you got Tinker's Tools before when you multi-classed into it, but you also got Thieves Tools before, and you no longer get Thieves Tools proficiency if you multi-class into Artificer. So instead of Thieves Tools proficiency, you gained a skill proficiency. That's probably an upgrade, probably, because you can get Thieves Tool from your background if you really want it. Okay, now let's move into the class table here. See the two of them in comparison. The spell casting is the same. The number of spells prepared works out to be roughly the same. They changed it from being the formula, which was like Artificer level plus your intelligence modifier, and then divide that by 2, which is how they did it for Paladins as well, right? Now they've, and a lot of classes did that. Now it's purely based on just this prepared column number listed right here, which roughly works out to the same almost all of the time, okay? So even though there might be like I had a gut reaction. Like, what? Only 2 spells prepared? It's roughly the same, right? Because if you start off with a +3 intelligence modifier at level 1, that's 1 + 3, that's 4. Divide that by 2, you got 2 anyway to start. So basically the same, guys. There's a big change here in the form of the plans known versus the infusions known. In 2014, in the 2014 version, the infusions known was twice the number of infusions you could create. Now it's equal to the number of items you can create plus 2. You can see it starts off the same, 2 and 4, but as you get into lower levels, it's 3 and 5 instead of 3 and 6. Now it's 4 and 6 at level 10 instead of 4 and 8, 5 and 7, 6 and 8. And so you finish off knowing 8 plans now, and you can create 6. Whereas before you could create 6 infusions and you knew 12 infusion plans, which in the 2014 version wasn't a big deal. Knowing that many infusion plans didn't really help you. It was so hard. But we have a feature now coming up that makes it worthwhile to know more plans, and they gave you less plans to know. So it was like 2 steps forward, 1 step back on that one, but still net positive, okay? All right, spell casting. Let's get into the spell casting for this. All right, you still have to have a tool, and it does have the note that says every spell you cast, every Artificer spell you cast requires you to be using one of these as your spellcasting focus. So you must be using a tool as a spellcasting focus. You do, and note this, there's another change here. Whenever you finish a long rest, you can change your list of prepared spells, replacing any of the spells there with other Artificer spells of your for which you have a spell slot. Sorry. Um, and in the UA, I believe it showed that you can only change one per long rest, which is what they changed Paladins and Rangers to. Paladins and Rangers both changed in 2024 so that when they take a long rest, they can change one spell. And I was expecting that for the Artificer, and yet they left it at the Artificer can change every spell with a long rest. Not super powerful. I don't know if I'd call that powerful, but useful, right? It's not very often you want to change more than one spell, but it will happen and does happen. So that's the other change there. Then getting into first level abilities. Sorry, a bit out of order there. Magical tinkering. So first up, magical tinkering now automatically gives you the mending cantrip. So if you look at the Artificer spell list, you can see that the mending cantrip is no longer on the Artificer spell list, which I think is they shouldn't have done that. But it's because you already know mending and you don't need it on your spell, so you always have it prepared. The problem with removing it from the Artificer spell list is things like if they reprint Artificer Initiate, which lets somebody else take it, and now they can take an Artificer cantrip. They cannot get mending through that. Now I don't know if you want mending through that, but you can't anymore. All right, magical tinkering used to be you create 3 of these little objects that can either like create a small visual image or a recording of 25 words that it repeats, or sheds bright light in 5 feet and dim light for another 5 feet. Very minimal value. I mean, I know creative players who have talked about how they've used this, or creative people who've talked about how they've used this in creative ways to be quite valuable. The only time I've ever firsthand witnessed a player using this was just to create a little bit of light. And they would create these 3 of these light objects, and then, or however many they wanted, and like attach it to multiple characters' shoulders. Now everybody has at least a little bit of light, which became totally useless once everybody has dark vision with like goggles of night, right? Which eventually everybody gets. Now they changed it so that as a magic action, while you're holding Tinker's tools, so you do have to have Tinker's tools, you can create one of these objects, and they last the um, until you finish a long rest. Okay, at which point it just vanishes, and you can do this a number of times equal to your intelligence modifier, and you regain all of those uses when you finish a long rest. This is cool. I think it's better than the previous version. Certainly flavorful. Is it enough? I don't think so. Like, I think the crafter feat, this is what the crafter feat should have been. And then the artificer should have gotten something stronger. Like, I don't know. Maybe they could create actual weapons and armor or something like that as a magic action. I don't know. Anyway, it's better, which is good, but not awesome. It's not very often you see people using most of these items, right? Crowbar, most people don't even realize crowbar gives you advantage on like applicable strength skill checks. So crowbar is useful. I've seen people use like a pole. Rope gets used, whenever you want to tie somebody up, which happens, or you want to, somebody who's got a great ability to climb, wants to climb up a wall and throw in a rope to others. So there's uses. It's just not awesome. And the reason for that really comes down to the fact that none of these are very expensive and anyone can just buy them and have them. So what you're really doing is like, it helps you save on inventory space. But if you got a bag of holding, you could buy every one of these, throw them in your bag of holding, and you're set. And now it's no longer even an issue. And anyone can just be like, oh, I have that too. And now your thing is no longer special. And by like level 5, right, everybody should have a bag of holding probably. And that's why it's just not special, which is kind of a theme for artificers in general here. All right, let's move on. Replicate magic item. All right, this is the big ticket thing that replaces infusions. All right. And largely it's the same. The big differences are, there's a few big differences. One, you don't need the base item to create it anymore, which is important later because you can learn plans for common armor. So at level 2, the artificer can just make plate armor of gleaming or half plate armor of gleaming for yourself. And now you and a buddy have armor that's way better than people can normally access for like until level 5, 6, 7, depending on how much money you're getting and how the DM handles that. And you can just have it at level 2. You can only create 2 of these things at a time, but that would be a strong way to start, right? An artificer with half plate and a shield, and they could give themselves a shield +1 at level 2. That's one of the plans that's available. That's 17 +3. plus your dexterity. No, 17 plus 3, that's 20 AC, right? So an Artificer could just have 20 AC at level 2, which is better than anyone else, right? The best that, like, unless the DM just hands out great armor, the best that the other classes can do is like 19 with a defense fighting style. So that's going to feel pretty great right at level 2, but eventually those other classes are going to catch up and pass you. But this is good for level 2. All right, so that's one of the big differences. The other big difference is you can now use any wand or weapon that you created through replicate magic item. You can use it as a spellcasting focus in lieu of Tinker's tools or artisan tools. Yeah. So, and that was a feature that was kind of like reserved for the battlesmith, and now everyone can do it, right? As long as it's something you created through replicate. Whereas the battlesmith had the ability to just say any magic weapon, not even if it wasn't one of their infusions. And they added wand, which is great. So now the artillerist and the alchemist are going to benefit from this. I think yeah. It still has a limitation that you can only create one instance, like one object out of each plan. So if you have the plans for plate armor of gleaming, you can't create 2 of them. You could create 1 plate armor of gleaming. That's it. You'd have to have a different plan for plate armor of what's the one? Comfort. Yeah, plate armor of comfort. And so you could still have 2 plate armors, but you got to have 2 different plans for plate armor if you want to use both. Otherwise, it's the same. It works the same. I guess it just kind of skips a step of having to have that base item and then you put the infusion on it. I think this will make it so it actually functions easier in D&D Beyond 2. I wonder if they've got that coding working yet. I'll check that out in a bit. And there's a reminder right there that, hey, everyone can use the tools for magic item crafting in the Dungeon Master's Guide, which I do, and I recommend that, right? Crafting magic items is a big part of the fantasy, so let your players do it. Here's the key, though. Here's the key. You manage the downtime you're handing out. Don't just let them have as much downtime as they want. If they just say, hey, I'd like to just stay in town for 10 days and just craft whatever I want, don't let them do that, right? Make them have encounters every day. They could say they're trying to do that, and then the next day something happens, and there's just encounters every day, interrupting it. Some sort of adventure, not just random encounters, but I would probably do some sort of adventure event, just interrupting every single day, right? But probably the easier way to go than just doing that, because that's like letting them try and then kind of punishing them for trying, and then eventually they'll figure out like, oh, he's not going to just let us do this, or the DM is not going to just let us do this. I would just be upfront and say, no, you can't do that. I'm just not going to let you, right? Like you will have something interrupt you every single day. So they don't. So that way, it's just upfront. Everybody knows, and it doesn't feel like being punished. But then give them a way that they know they're going to get downtime, right? Here's how you're going to get downtime. Here's my downtime system for when you get it and how you can use it and things like that. So they have something to count on, so they can be looking forward to. Here's when I start crafting magic items. Here's how I get to start doing that cool thing. Okay, be upfront about it is my recommendation. And yes, allowing anybody to craft magic items, which they no longer even need a spell slot anymore. In 2014, they had to have a spell slot to craft magic items. Now they don't even need that. They just need proficiency with the Arcana skill and the relevant tool proficiency, and then they can craft anything. And yes, that devalues the Artificer a bit. But I still think you should do it, right? Like it's just wizards creating magic items as part of the fantasy. I would let my players do it. It's just something that's really fun and let them lean into it. And I can give, like maybe at another time, give recommendations on how to manage all of that so it doesn't turn in too crazy. All right, but now let's get into the list of plans you can choose. It's actually hard to show the old version list of plans, but I'll go through it and just call out the changes, or at least items. Yeah, changes. So first up, you can now create a common magic item of any type. And like I said, that means the item is created, right? So you can choose this to make armor, half plate and full plate. It's not called full plate, it's just called plate armor now. So you can just create those with your plans. And when you level up, you can swap a plan too, which is, you could do that before, but if you choose plate, armor of gleaming, when it's no longer relevant because your players already have plate armor, regular plate armor, or they get plate armor +1 and things like that. You don't need that plan anymore. When you level up, swap it out for something that's more useful for you. So that's a net win for the Artificer, a net power increase, which is good. They needed it, especially in tier 1. In tier 1 and tier 2, like levels 1 to 10 is where the Artificer really struggled, in my opinion. And it's good to see them getting some power increases in that range. Most of this list is basically the same as what they could get before. They did remove like the Mind Sharpener. They used to be able to create that at level 2, but Mind Sharpener has now moved to level 6, which I thought is interesting. That one is useful. It's great. I don't think it needed to move back at all. Then you have the Helm of Awareness, which moved from level 10 to level 6. So they moved that one up, which is fine. It was a lot like a Weapon of Warning, which a lot of players have by level 5 anyway. If you're following like the recommended magic items per tier that they have in the player's handbook, the 2024 player's handbook, they could just have a Weapon of Warning at level 5. The Radiant Weapon was renamed a Dazzling Weapon. And there was one other change that I thought I identified in here. I think that's it. Okay, those 3 changes there. Level 10 changes. You can now create any uncommon wondrous item that isn't cursed. Okay, any uncommon wondrous item. So that's like spell rot tattoos of higher levels now. The Thayan spell rot tattoo, which requires attunement, but it also now counts that spell as being prepared for you. So you just add a spell to your spell list. Now it doesn't count as an Artificer spell. Maybe it does. I think a DM could interpret it that way. It says that since your replicated magic item gave you the ability to make that item, and that item gave you the prepared spell, maybe that's an Artificer feature, and now it counts as an Artificer spell. I don't know. DM would have to rule on that, but you can just add spells to your spell list now. Now it takes an attunement slot, but you can add really important spells that you need. So it gives you an alternate way to build your character and to branch out into other spell casting roles that you couldn't do. You're still going to be limited by your half caster spell slot progression and number of spells you can cast. So this is not going to make you an A tier controller, healer, support, or blaster. But it'll help. Now, it does feel a lot better in the later levels because half casters catch up on the number of spell slots in like tier 3 and 4. So in later levels, you could be probably a solid B as a healer, a solid B as maybe not a blaster, but a controller and support, just based on your spell list. All right. Otherwise, this looks more or less the same as what we saw in the last UA. And here we have now this note here at level 14, you can now create rare wondrous items, which means higher level spell rot tattoos, higher level, all kinds of items, which is great. Rare. I don't even know why they put Ring of Free Action and Ring of Protection here, because those are rare wondrous items. I guess those are rare rings. Rings is a separate category. So it's just wondrous items, which is separate from rings. But you have a much broader set. And notice that they added the Wand of Web here that you can do at level 6. And Wand of Web. Web is a great spell for most of the game, right? It's pretty good even in tier 4. So worthwhile, gives you a bunch of charges. And you have ways to deal with those charges and interact with those charges now. So they're doing pretty well. All right. Level 3 and 4, standard stuff. Level 6, this is what they used to get. They used to get Tool Expertise, which was cool and flavorful and had minimal impact, right? That is not, like the power score on that is mostly a ribbon. Even with how I run proficiencies, that's mostly a ribbon, okay? And I think they could have just let him have it, and let him keep it. But they removed that and replaced it with Magic Item Tinker, which you've got 3 features in there. Charge magic item. So as a bonus action, you can touch a magic item within 5 feet. You expend a spell slot, and the item regains a number of charges equal to the spell slot level you expended. So you could be recharging magic items. That Wand of Web, you could be pumping charges back into it. which is interesting because Web is a second level spell. If you cast that with your spell slot, it would take a second level spell slot. But if you expend a second level spell slot to recharge your Wand of Web, it gets 2 slots back, and that's 2 castings of magic item of Web. So you're coming out ahead. Kind of a cool feature. Drain magic item. This is kind of the opposite. You can, but it's not just charged items. You can just destroy any replicated magic item you have created, and you regain a spell slot. If the item was a common level magic item, you regain a first level spell slot. If it was uncommon or rare, you regain a second level spell slot. I don't know why they didn't just say if it's rare, you get a third level spell slot. That would have been fine. Not even, I wouldn't even call that powerful. It would have been nice. And this is going to make it disappointing. So, and you can only do that once per long rest, whereas you can recharge a magic item as much as you want. You can only drain a magic item once per long rest. And finally, you have transmute magic item, which is as a magic action, you can touch one magic item that you created with replicate magic item and transform it into a different magic item. The resulting magic item must be from another plan you know. And this is where the reduction in number of plans known was the one step back. So transmute magic item is 2 steps forward, but fewer plans is 1 step back. So now, I mean, you can create all but 2 of the plans you know. So you're going to already have all of those out. And the only reason you'd switch is it gives you a little versatility, which is nice, and that is the reason to switch. But there's now only 2 other options of what you might switch to, which is probably good, but probably not, but not nearly as cool as it would have been if they just gave you the more number of plans. And again, if they just let you have that, that would not have been OP. I'm not even sure I would have called that great. It would have been nice. It would have been, it would have been good. So that's unfortunate. And level 7, Flash of Genius, which we always got at level 7, so that's nice. And they put in, yes, the all-important clause right there. When a creature fails, now you can use your reaction to trigger this. Before it didn't have that, and it was when a creature makes an ability check. So you technically had to declare this before they roll. Previously. Now you declare it after they fail, which makes it so much better. Okay, so much better, because then you're not just using it and they would have succeeded anyway in wasting your uses of it. And frankly, I think most of us probably just ran it that way just to make the Artificer just a little bit better because they needed it. But otherwise, it works exactly the same. But that one little change makes this, like 10 times better, easily 10 times better, which is good because they needed it. All right, level 10, Magic Item Adept. So you can attune to 4 magic items at once, which is the same as the first bullet point you got, but they removed this one, which is if you're going to use the downtime rules to craft magic items of common or uncommon, it took 1/4 of the normal time and it cost you half as much of the usual gold. So you lost that as a base class, but in the last UA we saw they added some piece of that back into each of the subclasses. So we'll see what they do with the subclasses when I get to those later today. Spell storing item. All right, big changes here. And we saw this in the UA, but you can now put level 3 Artificer spells in this. So if you're the Artillerist, yes, that's Fireball, and it's 10 times. It has a number of charges equal to 10 times your Intelligence modifier, which means if you have +5, which you should by this point, that's 10 Fireballs that you can put in this ring, or 10 any third level spell that you want, which is great. You can also hand this to other creatures. It doesn't require attunement, so you can just hand it to them. They can use it. Then they can use a magic action to produce the spell effect that you put in it. But and 2 things. One, it still uses their concentration, not yours. It uses your spellcasting ability modifier, not theirs. Notice it doesn't say it uses your spell save DC or spell attack. It's just your spellcasting ability modifier, which means it would be your spellcasting ability modifier with their proficiency bonus, not your proficiency bonus, which is a little more complicated but less powerful than I think it would have otherwise been, and maybe that's the right way to handle it. Like if you put this on your homunculus, which is probably like what CR. I think that one doesn't scale up with you. Or like a familiar, which is CR0, right? Which has a proficiency bonus of 2. It's going to use your spellcasting ability modifier of +5 with their proficiency bonus of 2. So it's going to be +7 on the attack roll if it's an attack spell, or a DC of spell save DC of 15 instead of yours, which would have been at this point 17. Yeah, 17. That's probably the way it should be. Otherwise, this is very powerful. It uses their concentration, not yours, which is nice. The other thing is they put in this clause to prevent, yes, player shenanigans of those people who are getting ready to be like, yeah, I'm going to put a fireball in it, and then I'm going to have it, an army of these secondary creatures skeletons that I've animated or whatever it is, and they're gonna each on their turn use their action to cast the spell and then hand it to the next creature who on their turn in the turn order will then cast the spell again and again and again and again, and they cast all 10 fireballs in one round. Okay, so no, you can't do that, guys. Once it produces the effect, it can't do so again until the start of the creature's next turn. So whichever creature did it first, the object can't do that, create that effect again until the start of that creature's next turn, which is the way it should have been, for sure. Okay, and that's it for that one. Then we have Magic Item Savant at level 15. You can now attune to up to 5 magic items at once. And when you finish a short rest, you regain 1 expended use of your Flash of Genius feature, which is great. Probably should have got this earlier. I think level 10. I would have given this to him at level 10, at least. Frankly, I would have given it to him right at level 7. Just let him have it. Flash of Genius is, I think, on the level of a Channel Divinity and like Second Wind. I don't know. Maybe it's better than those. It's not super strong. It's not as powerful as the Paladin Aura of Protection. And so I do think I would have definitely, they should have gotten this short rest recovery of 1 use at level 7. But all right, you get 1 back at level 14, which is nice. That's better, right? They never had any recovery of it before. So better. That's an improvement. Don't want to look a gift horse in the mouth. You lose this feature, though, which is the ability to tune to any magic item, ignoring basically all of the prerequisites of class, species, spell, or level. Gone, right? You don't have that anymore. Level 18, Magic Item Master. You can now attune to 6 magic items, which is exactly as it was before. No change. And then level 19, Epic Boon, which is what every class in 2024 has now. And then level 20, Soul of Artifice. Okay, Cheat Death. So we lose this ability, which was the best ability the Artificer got. Like in the whole 20 levels, this was their number 1 feature. So it's a bummer to see that go. This was the main reason, like, I would play Artificer. If I was going to go, if I knew I was going to level 20, I would definitely stay Artificer the whole way just to make sure I got this, because this was great. This was very strong. And combined with Flash of Genius meant, as an Artificer, you're probably never going to fail a saving throw. And if you have a Paladin in the party, the two of you together are just a rock star team. And I'd say they're still a rock star team now, but it's just less power. Your power is less. And I still think that the Artificer base class still comes in as perhaps the least powerful of every class. Yeah, I'll put in some more time thinking about that, but that's my initial reaction is they're still the least powerful, although they're far better than they used to be, okay? So if I were to rank them, I would definitely be putting in some B's and C's, maybe even an A in tier 1, in tier 2. So they definitely improved them, okay? They took care of our boy, the Artificer. He's definitely a lot better. Not where I'd like to see, but better. A lot better. Okay, so Cheat Death. What it does is if you drop to 0 hit points, you can disintegrate a number of uncommon or rare magic items that you created with Replicate Magic Item. And if you do so, your hit points instead change to a number equal to 20 times the number of magic items disintegrated. So if you disintegrate, you can have 6 replicated magic items at this point. If you destroy all 6 of them, you have 120 hit points instead of dropping to 0, which might be like 3/4, half to 3/4 of the hit point of your hit point maximum, which is pretty nice. And this has nothing to do with your other magic items. So by this level 20, you're probably like the items you're attuned to are probably very rare and legendary items that you found, right? Probably not attuning or heavily relying on your replicated magic items. So if you're probably destroying like some ancillary wands, a wand of web, bags of holding, goggles of night, I don't know, things like that. You might notice the pinch of losing those items, but they're not your core items. They're not your main weapon. They're not your main armor. They're not your main anything, right? Most likely, right? Which means it's not going to hurt too bad. Like it's probably going to hurt way less to just destroy them all and have 120 hit points instead of go to 0, right? That's going to hurt less instead of dying. All right. And then magical guidance. When you finish short rest, you regain all uses of your Flash of Genius, which is great. They have this clause that says as long as you're attuned to at least 1 magic item, which is weird. That's almost never going to happen. Like I said, you're going to be attuned to legendary items and very rare items that you found along the way or created through normal downtime. You are not relying on those replicated magic items. So you even if you destroy all of your replicated magic items, you're still going to be attuned to those. The only way you're not going to have those available is if, yes, in the very, very, very rare scenario where the party was captured and you have all your items taken away, which doesn't even happen every campaign and is pretty rare. The last thing I want to cover on the base class is the spell list, which I think is very important and is one of the most important things I think they needed to change. And the spoiler alert here is that they didn't change it enough. They added like a couple of things, but didn't really address the issue of like paladins and rangers have a bunch of things on their spell list and unique spells to them that really enhance and boost their base martial function. Now, I think they're doubling down on the Artificer is half caster and not full martial, like the Ranger and Paladin. They're half caster and magic item creator, you know? Like, I don't know. So they're doubling down on that, and they did not add spells to their spell list. In fact, they didn't even give them a. There's a couple of unique spells. I don't think they gave them any unique spells in this, which I assumed they would give them like half a dozen or a dozen Artificer unique spells like the Paladin and Ranger have, where it's like only the Artificer can do this, and it really helps the Artificer be great at what the Artificer is supposed to be doing, whether it's some kind of enhancement for those subclasses, those martial subclasses for Artificer. Like they could have gotten these spells that enhance their martial capabilities, like the Ranger and Paladin both have, or they could have gotten other spells that are unique to them that enhance what it means to be an Artificer. I don't know what that would have been because I'm still not really getting. Is this supposed to be a support class that's really adding a lot of support? They're not really narrowing it in on a specific role that the Artificer has. So they're kind of this like versatile, which I don't consider a role. Versatile is something everybody should build for and have versatility, right? Like if you say I'm only good at being versatile and I'm not good at anything else, then you're still a nothing to the party. Being versatile means you have a lot of options and but not good. And I wouldn't call it jack of all trades. Like jack of all trades, which is kind of what the bard does. They can be A in like three of the roles. Sorry, they can be A in like five or six of the roles. You only have enough spell preparations to be good at A at any three of them on a particular build, but they can be good at like half of all the roles in the game. Artificer doesn't have that. They're not really a jack of all trades. Jack of all trades means you're pretty good at many things. These guys are not pretty good at anything so far. We got to get in the subclasses, and maybe they really juiced up the subclasses, and the subclasses are going to really carry all that heavy lifting, do all that heavy lifting for us. All right, spell list. So they added elementalism versus the 2014 version of the Artificer, which makes sense. That's a ribbon flavor cantrip, doesn't really do anything. You see mending is missing. That's because now the Artificer just always has mending. And they added True Strike, which wasn't on the Artificer spell list before. And remember, the Artificer, depending on how your DM runs it, still has access to all of the 2014 expanded content and spells there. So they should, if the DM plays it that way, they would still have access to Booming Blade and Green Flame Blade and all those other spells. All right, and that's true for every single spell level. So their level 1 list is basically the same. No real changes there. Level 2, they added Arcane Vigor, which was present in the 2024 Player's Handbook, and Sorcerers and Wizards got it, so now the Artificer gets it, which is nice. Dragon's Breath. They didn't have Dragon's Breath before, so now they do, which is great. Homunculus Servant is a new spell that used to be an infusion, and now it's a second level spell, so there's a unique Artificer spell. I don't think that's as good as Find Steed, and Paladins can cast Find Steed for free once per day. Artificers don't get that. Okay, going down the list, that I believe is the end of all the new second level spells. Third level spells. List is the same. Yep. Fourth level spells, I thought they added one. Nope, spell list is the same, which is a bummer because the fourth and fifth level spell list for the Artificer was so small. Okay, and they did add one for fifth level spells, and that's Circle of Power, which is great because that is a really strong spell. And that's a great support spell. So Artificer with that plus Flash of Genius is going to be huge. All right. So it's huge that they added that one. That is a very good support spell. The rest of these are all spells they already had. And there you have it. That is the base class. So stay tuned. I'm going to go over all the subclasses now in subsequent videos that are going to be coming out shortly. Thanks for watching. Remember to be cool when you play D&D. It's for fun. It's a game. These people are your friends or could become your friends. And catch you next time.